In less than 10 seconds, the illusion of a 30-year conquest shattered against a locked door. It happened quietly on a regular Tuesday morning at a private administrative wing of the Windsor estate. Camilla arrived with her personal security detail, expecting to walk right through the heavy oak doors into the suite of offices. She had used to manage her private affairs and coordinate her family's interests. She reached out, swiped her royal clearance card against the security pad, and waited for the familiar green light and the soft click of the heavy lock disengaging. Instead, the pad flashed a solid, unforgiving red. She tried again. Red. She stepped back, assuming it was a simple technological glitch, a minor inconvenience for the Queen Consort. But then a junior administrative aide stepped out from a side hallway, eyes fixed firmly on the floor, and delivered a single sentence that stopped the blood in Camilla's veins. The aide politely informed her that the Duchy of Cornwall had updated its estate access protocol overnight, and her clearance for this specific private wing had been permanently revoked. This is the story of the ultimate institutional reckoning. It is the story of a secret, desperate power grab Camilla attempted behind closed doors, how Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered the paper trail, and the devastating silent retaliation they executed to stop her. What Camilla realized standing in that hallway was not just that she had lost an office. She realized with terrifying clarity that despite the titles, the crowns, and the decades spent climbing to the absolute pinnacle of the British monarchy, she actually owns absolutely nothing. To understand the sheer magnitude of this humiliation, you have to look back and understand the fortress of illusion Camilla had built around herself. For 3 decades, she played the longest and most calculated game in modern royal history. She survived the public hatred, she outlasted the shadow of Princess Diana, and she slowly, methodically cemented her position beside Charles. She moved from the hated mistress to the tolerated companion, then to the Duchess of Cornwall, and finally to the ultimate prize, Queen Consort. With every step up that ladder, her confidence hardened into an unshakable belief in her own untouchability. She believed she had Charles completely controlled, wrapping herself around his dependencies and positioning herself as the indispensable gatekeeper to the king. In her mind, the victory was absolute. She began pushing the boundaries, slowly elevating her own non-royal children, bringing her family into the inner sanctuary of royal life, and subtly attempting to erase the lingering institutional memory of Diana. She felt invincible. She was the woman who had won. But what Camilla fundamentally misunderstood was the difference between holding a title and holding the actual deed to the empire. She mistook Charles's affection for institutional authority, and she drastically underestimated the silent, enduring grief of Prince William and the fierce protective ruthlessness of Princess Anne. The trigger for this ultimate collapse was not a screaming match or a public scandal. It was a quiet, highly calculated administrative maneuver born out of pure commercial desperation. As Charles grew older, and his public visibility began to naturally shift, a quiet panic began to take root inside Camilla's inner circle. The terrifying reality of the royal structure is that the Queen Consort has no independent wealth-generating power within the institution. She does not own the palaces. She does not own the Duchy of Cornwall. She does not own the sovereign grant. She is a tenant of the crown, entirely dependent on the man wearing it. Sources deeply embedded in the financial architecture of the palace indicate that Camilla recognized this vulnerability and attempted to secure her own permanent safety net. Behind the scenes, she allegedly initiated a series of quiet requests to transfer certain long-term leases of private country properties into trust structures that would benefit her own bloodline. Furthermore, she attempted to secure a locked independent operational budget drawn from the private estates, a financial pipeline that would bypass the standard oversight committees and remain securely under her control long after Charles's reign ended. It was a brilliant, stealthy move to convert royal proximity into permanent generational wealth for her own family. It was supposed to look like routine financial planning for a senior royal. But Camilla made one fatal miscalculation. She forgot who actually owns the ledger. When Queen Elizabeth died, the absolute financial power of the Duchy of Cornwall did not go to Charles. It bypassed him completely and landed squarely in the hands of Prince William. The duchy is a billion-dollar real estate and investment empire. And William did not just inherit it, he took active total command of it. Meanwhile, Princess Anne, the unyielding guardian of the crown's physical and administrative boundaries, was watching every single movement within the royal households. The discovery did not happen through gossip, it happened through a cold, hard paper trail. When the lease transfer requests and the budget restructuring documents moved through the estate administrative offices, they crossed the desk of the duchy's financial managers. William was immediately notified. He brought the documents to Princess Anne. Together they looked at the sheer audacity of what Camilla was attempting to do. She was trying to siphon the private assets of the monarchy to secure her own family's future, using Charles's declining energy as a smokescreen to push the paperwork through. If this had been the 1990s, there would have been leaked stories, royal briefings, and dramatic confrontations. But William and Anne do not operate like that. They belong to a different school of warfare. William carries his mother's enduring legacy not as a weapon of public emotion, but as a shield of absolute institutional precision. He has watched his mother be consumed by the chaos of palace drama, and he promised himself he would never allow his family or his wife, Catherine, to be subjected to it. Catherine's uncomplaining sacrifice and flawless dedication to the crown had already secured the future. William did not need to scream at Camilla. He simply needed to use the system against her. The retaliation was a masterclass in weaponized restraint. William and Anne did not confront Camilla. They did not take the documents to Charles to force a father and son argument. Instead, they executed a silent, devastating administrative freeze. William exercised his absolute legal authority as the Duke of Cornwall. With a few strokes of a pen, he permanently denied the lease transfers, citing long-term estate management protocols. He audited the private payroll sheets and systematically removed any discretionary funding lines that were quietly bleeding into Camilla's private projects without direct documented benefit to the working monarchy. Princess Anne, acting with the quiet authority of the senior ranks, ensured that the physical access codes and estate privileges aligned strictly with these new financial boundaries. They built an invisible, impenetrable wall of bureaucracy around Camilla, brick by brick, entirely legally, and without saying a single word to her. They turned the very institution she spent 30 years climbing into a cage that she could not escape. This brings us back to that hallway at the Windsor estate. When that junior aide looked at the floor and told the Queen Consort that her access had been revoked, it was not a technological error. It was the physical manifestation of William's absolute power. It was the moment the trap snapped shut. Standing in front of that red flashing light, surrounded by her security detail, who could do absolutely nothing to open a door she did not legally own. The sheer commercial desperation of her reality crushed her. She could not fire the aide. She could not order the door open. She could not demand access to the duchy's funds. Every single piece of leverage she thought she possessed evaporated in the cold air of that corridor. The properties belong to William. The wealth belongs to William. The future belongs to Catherine. Camilla was merely an occupant, a temporary resident whose privileges could be erased by a single email from a financial manager she had likely never even met. Breathing heavily, her face completely blank, but her mind spinning with a sudden, suffocating panic, Camilla realized there was only one thing left to do. There was only one person who could override William, only one man who could tear down this invisible wall and restore her illusion of absolute power. She turned away from the locked door, walked silently back to her waiting vehicle, and picked up a secure phone to call Charles. She was ready to demand his intervention. She was ready to force him to choose between his wife and his heir. But she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other end of that line. The secure line connected with a soft digital hum. Camilla stood in the shadow of the Windsor estate. The heavy oak doors still locked behind her, her breathing shallow and fast. When Charles answered, she did not waste time with pleasantries. She laid out the exact parameters of the humiliation she had just endured. She detailed the revoked clearance, the frozen budget requests, the sheer disrespect of being turned away by a junior aide. She demanded that the King of England intervene immediately. She expected outrage. She expected Charles to summon William to overrule the Duchy of Cornwall and to instantly restore the dignity of his Queen Consort. But what she got instead was something infinitely more devastating. She got silence. It was not the silence of a monarch calculating his wrath. It was the heavy, exhausted silence of an aging man who had already surrendered to the inevitable. When Charles finally spoke, his voice was reportedly quiet, carefully measured and completely devoid of the fire she was looking for. He did not promise to fix it. He did not vow to reprimand William. Instead, he gently reminded her that the Duchy of Cornwall was a separate legal entity. He murmured that estate management was now entirely William's purview and that it would be inappropriate for the Crown to publicly interfere with the Duke's financial administration. That was the psychological climax of Camilla's 30-year campaign. That was the exact moment the illusion of absolute power permanently shattered. Charles was not going to save her. Not because he did not care for her, but because Charles understood a cold, institutional reality that Camilla was desperately trying to ignore. He is a king in the twilight of his life. William is the dawn. Charles knows that his reign is merely a bridge between the monumental legacy of his mother and the robust, long-term future of his son. He simply does not have the political capital, the energy, or the institutional leverage to wage a war against his own heir over administrative access. By refusing to intervene, Charles silently confirmed what William had just proven. The king might wear the crown, but the Prince of Wales holds the keys to the kingdom. To understand why this realization is so utterly paralyzing, you have to look past the diamonds and the royal carriages and unpack the commercial desperation of Camilla's reality. The general public looks at the British royal family and assumes they are all uniformly infinitely wealthy. But the financial architecture of the monarchy is a highly compartmentalized system designed specifically to protect the bloodline. As Queen Consort, Camilla receives a designated allowance from the sovereign grant to cover her official duties, her wardrobe, and her immediate working staff. But that is all it is. An allowance. It is operational funding, not personal wealth. The real money, the staggering generational empire-building wealth, lives within the private estates. The Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall hold the billion-dollar property portfolios, the commercial investments, the fertile farmlands, and the lucrative residential leases. When William became the Duke of Cornwall, he took sole, absolute control over an estate that generates tens of millions of dollars in liquid profit every single year. Camilla has no legal claim to a single penny of it. She has no equity. She has no portfolio. If Charles were to pass away tomorrow, Camilla would not inherit the palaces. She would not inherit the crown jewels. She would be transitioned to the status of a queen dowager, moved to a comfortable but strictly managed secondary residence, and placed on a fixed pension entirely controlled by King William. That detail matters. It changes the reading of everything she has done in recent years. Her subtle push to bring her children into the royal fold, her attempts to secure private estate, leases her desire to establish independent funding lines. It was not just blind ambition, it was commercial desperation. She is a woman living in a billionaire's palace who realizes she's one heartbeat away from being nothing more than a well-funded pensioner completely at the mercy of a stepson who has never forgotten what she did to his mother. And William is making sure she feels that reality every single day. The revoked access at Windsor was just the beginning of the new order. What looked like a routine administrative update was actually a total dismantling of her empire. In the weeks that followed, the incident at the locked door subtle, highly calculated shifts began occurring across the royal estates. And to see them, you have to look at the physical spaces. For years, Camilla had treated Highgrove House, Charles's beloved country estate, as her personal domain. She had overseen its interior updates, hosted her family there, and woven her presence into every room. But Highgrove is not owned by Charles, it is owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. Charles is technically a tenant who pays rent to William. Shortly after the financial freeze at Windsor Palace, insiders noted a quiet protocol change regarding the management of Highgrove. William's estate team assumed direct operational oversight of the property's maintenance and staff payroll. It was framed as an efficiency measure, a streamlining of estate resources, but the message was cold and precise. William was politely reminding the king and the queen consort exactly whose roof they were sleeping under. He did not kick them out, he did not cause a public scene. He simply tightened the administrative grip just enough to let Camilla know that she was a guest in his house. And while William secured the physical and financial boundaries of the monarchy, Catherine began quietly restoring the emotional and historical legacy that Camilla had tried so desperately to overwrite. Catherine did not need to issue statements. She did not need to fight for access to the private offices. She simply allowed the contrast between herself and Camilla to do the talking. There was a specific moment shortly after the administrative freeze that perfectly encapsulated this shifting dynamic. It was a formal diplomatic reception at Buckingham Palace. Camilla arrived wearing a heavy, imposing tiara and layers of diamonds projecting the visual armor of a queen. She commanded her staff, she positioned herself front and center, and she worked the room with the practiced intensity of someone who feels they have to constantly prove they belong there. Then Catherine walked in. Catherine wore a simple, elegant gown and the lover's knot tiara, the exact crown so deeply associated with Princess Diana. She did not demand attention. She did not hover near the king to borrow his authority. She moved through the room with a quiet, unshakable grace. And the entire diplomatic corps naturally gravitated toward her. The room shifted its center of gravity without a single word. being spoken. That is the devastating contrast of Schadenfreude. Camilla had spent 30 years fighting for a title, alienating the public, manipulating the press, and scrambling for financial security, only to find herself standing in a room where all the real power flowed effortlessly toward the woman who never had to scheme for it. Catherine owns the future not because she married William, but because she embodies the exact dedication, restraint, and selfless duty that the institution requires to survive. She is the true heir to Queen Elizabeth's legacy, and no amount of private office space or redirected budget lines could ever buy Camilla that kind of institutional reverence. This is why this story resonates so deeply beyond just one person. It is a masterclass in how true power actually operates. True power does not scream, it does not leak stories to the tabloids, it does not throw tantrums in the hallway. True power updates. A security protocol overnight. True power audits a payroll. True power quietly steps into the room wearing the right diamonds and watches the opposition crumble under the weight of their own irrelevance. Princess Anne and Prince William have drawn a line in the sand that Camilla can never cross. They have protected the crown, they have protected the legacy of Diana, and they have secured the future for Catherine. Camilla will continue to appear on the balcony. She will continue to smile for the cameras. She will continue to wear the heavy crowns and wave to the crowds. But behind those forced smiles, she will always carry the devastating knowledge of what really happened behind closed doors. She will always know that the doors are locked, the ledgers are closed, and the empire she sacrificed everything to conquer belongs entirely to someone else. If you found this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics of the royal family insightful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comments below what you think about William and Anne's silent retaliation. Until next time, keep looking beyond the illusion.